Educational approaches. Educational approaches refers to the methods, strategies, and philosophies used by educators to facilitate learning. These approaches shape the way teaching and learning happen, including how information is presented, how students engage with material, and how their progress is assessed. Types of educational approaches: traditional approach, constructivist approach, Montessori approach, inquiry based learning, experiential learning, behaviorist approach, humanistic approach. Traditional approach. The traditional approach is education is one of the oldest and most widely recognized educational model. It is often characterized by teacher-centered instruction, where the teacher plays the central role in delivering knowledge while students are expected to passively absorb the information. This approach has its root in classical education and remains influential in many educational systems around the world. Here's a detailed exploration of its key aspects, strengths, and limitations. Key characteristics of the traditional approach: teacher centered learning. The teacher is the primary authority figure in the classroom and main source of knowledge. Instruction is typically delivered through lectures or presentations. Students are expected to listen attentively, take notes, and memorize the material for assessment. There is less emphasis on active participation or student led discussion. Number two, curriculum focus. The traditional approach often follows a fixed, standardized curriculum. Core subjects like mathematics, science, language, arts, and history are emphasized with focus on knowledge acquisition. The curriculum tend to be uniform, meaning all students learn the same material in the same way regardless of individual differences. Number 3, lecture-based instruction. The predominant mode of teaching is through lectures, where the teacher delivers information to passive audience of student. Lessons are structured with little deviation from planned material. The use of textbooks is common and the students are required to follow along with the written materials. Number 4, structured classroom environment. Classroom Classrooms are typically highly structured with clear rules and expectations for behavior. Students sit in rows or desks facing the teacher, reinforcing the hierarchical structure. The focus is maintaining order and discipline, and deviation from established norms is often discouraged. Assessment and testing. Assessment in the traditional approach is typically done through standardized tests, quizzes, and written exams. These assessment measures the student's ability to recall information and demonstrate mastery of curriculum. Grades and ranking are often used to evaluate student performance and progress. Limitations of the traditional approach: passive learning and lack of engagement. One of the most significant criticism of the traditional approach is that it promotes passive learning. Students are often expected to sit quietly, listen, and absorb information without much interaction or critical thinking. This can lead to disengagement, especially for students who learn best through active participation, discussion, or hands on activities. Number two, limited focus on critical thinking and creativity. The traditional approach tends to prioritize memorization over critical thinking, problem solving, and creativity. Students may become adept at recalling information but may struggle to apply knowledge in real world context or think independently. By focusing heavily on rote learning, this approach may not encourage students to ask questions, think critically, or explain alternative perspective. Lack of personalization. The one size fits all nature of traditional education means that individual learning styles, strengths, and needs are often overlooked. All students are expected to learn the same material in the same way, regardless of their personal preferences or abilities. This can be practically this can be particularly challenging for students with learning differences who may require additional support or alternative methods of instruction. Teacher centered and authoritative. The traditional approach places the teacher at the center of the learning process, which can limit the role of students as active participant. The hierarchical structure may discourage collaboration, independent thinking, and self-directed learning. In some cases, students may feel disconnected from the learning process as they have little control over what they learn or how they engage with material. Number 5, emphasis on testing. Traditional education often emphasizes performance on standardized tests or exam. While these assessments provide measurable outcomes, they may not accurately reflect a student's understanding or potential. The pressure to perform the pressure to perform well on tests can lead to stress and anxiety for students and may encourage a narrow focus on test preparation rather than deeper learning. Constructive constructivist approach. The constructivist approach to education is based on the idea that learners actively construct their own understanding and knowledge of the world through experiences and reflecting on these experiences rather than passively receiving information. Students are viewed as active participants in their learning process. This approach is rooted in the theories of influential educational psychologists such as Jean Piaget and Lee Vygotsky. Principles of the constructivist approach. Active learning. Learners are actively involved in the learning process instead of passively receiving information from the teacher. Students engage in hands-on activities, problem solving and critical thinking. The teacher acts as facilitator, guiding students as they explore experiments and discover knowledge on their own. Number 2, learning as a social process. Constructivism emphasizes collaboration and discussion among students. Peer interaction allows learners to exchange ideas, clarify understanding, and refine their thinking. Group work, class discussions, and cooperative learning are commonly used strategies to foster instruction, to foster interaction and collective knowledge building. Number 3, learning is contextual. Learners construct new knowledge by building on prior knowledge and experiences. Constructivist classrooms aim to connect learning with real life situations and prior experiences to make it meaningful and relevant. Problem based learning and inquiry based learning are often used to allow students to explore real world issues and apply their learning to practical scenarios. Number 4, focus on deep understanding. Constructivism encourages learners to think critically and understand concepts deeply rather than memorizing facts. Students are encouraged to ask questions, seek answers, and engage in reflective thinking. The goal is not just to acquire knowledge, but to understand how and why these things happen. Learners develop the ability to apply their knowledge in new and unfamiliar situations. Number 5, reflection. Reflection is key component of the constructivist approach. Learners are encouraged to reflect on their learning experiences, assess their understanding, and identify their areas for further exploration. This reflective process allows students to consolidate their learning and gain insight into their own thinking processes, known as metacognition. Instructional strategies in the constructivist approach. Problem based learning (PBL). In PBL, students are presented with a real world problem and are tasked with finding a solution. This requires them to research, collaborate, and apply their knowledge in practical context. The teacher's role to facilitate the process by providing guidance and resources but not dictate how the problem should be solved. Inquiry based learning (IBL). Students are encouraged to ask questions, investigate topic and draw conclusions based on their findings. This approach fosters curiosity and develops research skills. The inquiry processes typically involves questioning, investigating, creating, discussing and reflecting. Collaborative learning. Students work in group to share ideas, solve problems, and complete projects. Collaborative learning promotes the exchange of diverse perspectives and allows students to learn from one another. Group work also helps develop communication and teamwork skills, which are essential for the 21st century workforce. Scaffolding. Teachers provide temporary support to help students achieve tasks that they would not be able to complete independently. As students become more competent, the support is gradually withdrawn, promoting independence. Scaffolding technique include modeling, giving hints, providing feedback, and breaking tasks into smaller manageable steps. Limitations of the constructivist approach: time consuming. Constructivist learning often requires more time than traditional method as students need time to explore, reflect, and construct their understanding. This can be challenging when there are curriculum time constraints. Number two, require skilled teacher. Teacher need to be well trained in facilitation and scaffolding techniques. It can be challenging for teacher to know how much guidance to provide without stifling students' autonomy or leaving them struggling. Assessment challenge. Assessment challenges. Number three, traditional assessments like standardized tests are often not well suited to constructivist learning, which emphasize process and application over memorization. This can make it difficult to measure student progress in standardized system. Number four, may not work for all students. Some students may struggle with the autonomy and open ended nature of constructivist learning, particularly those who thrive in more structured environments. Next is Montessori approach. The Montessori approach to education, developed by Maria Montessori in the early 20th century, is a child centered educational method based on scientific observations of children's learning processes. Montessori believed that children are naturally eager for knowledge and capable of initiating learning in a supportive, prepared environment. This method emphasizes independence, freedom within limits, and respect for their natural psychological, physical, and social development of a child. Key principles of Montessori education: child-centered learning. In the Montessori method, the child is placed at the center of the learning process. This belief that children are naturally curious and learn best when they are allowed to explore topics interest at their own pace. The teacher's role is to observe the child interest and provide an environment rich in materials that foster exploration and learning. Next is prepared environment. The classroom, known as the prepared environment, is carefully designed to facilitate independent learning and exploration. It includes materials and activities that cater to different stages of development. Everything in the Montessori classroom is arranged to accessible to children. Shelves are low, materials are neatly organized, and the environment is orderly to promote concentration and self-directed learning. The environment is typically divided into distinct areas such as practical life, sensorial, language, mathematics, and cultural subjects, science, geography, arts, etc. Freedom and independence. Children are given the freedom to choose their activities and work at their own pace. They are encouraged to make decisions about what they want to learn and when. Montessori education promotes independence, teaching children how to take care of themselves and their environment. For example, cleaning up after themselves, preparing snacks, or organizing their learning space. Hands on learning. Montessori education emphasizes hands on experiential learning. Children use specially designed materials to explore concepts in a concrete way before moving on to abstract ideas. The materials are self correcting, meaning that children can recognize their mistakes and correct them without adult intervention. This promotes autonomy and builds problem solving skills. Role of the teacher as a guide. In Montessori classroom, teachers are referred to as a guide or facilitator. Their role is not to direct the learning but to prepare and maintain the learning environment and observe the child's development. Teacher introduce new materials and lessons when a child is ready but allow the child to independently explore the materials. They provide support and guidance only when necessary. Limitations of the Montessori approach: lack of structure for some students. While Montessori emphasis on freedom is beneficial for many children, some may struggle without a more structured learning environment. Children who need more direction or thrive on external motivation may not adjust as well to Montessori open-ended approach. 2. Requires special training for teachers. Montessori teachers require specific training to understand the philosophy materials and methods of teaching. This can make it difficult to implement Montessori education in schools that do not have access to properly trained educators. Number 3, may not align with standardizing testing. Montessori focus on self-directed learning and individualized progress can sometimes conflict with traditional standardized testing and assessment methods. Montessori students may not be as prepared for the expectations of conventional schooling or testing framework. Number 4, limited social interaction in some classrooms. While Montessori promote peer learning, the emphasis on individual work can sometimes limit social interaction. Some children may benefit from more collaborative group-based learning experiences than what is typically offered in Montessori environments. Next is inquiry-based learning. IBL. Inquiry-based learning is an educational approach where students take the lead in their learning by asking questions, constructing investigations, and exploring topics to construct their own understanding. The process focuses on curiosity, exploration, and the pursuit of deeper knowledge through questioning and research. Key features of IBL: student centered approach. Students drive their own learning by posing questions and seeking answers. The teacher acts as a facilitator guiding the students through the inquiry process rather than delivering direct instruction. Focus on question. The learning processes begin with open-ended questions posed by the students. These questions guide the direction of the research and learning. For example, instead of memorizing facts about a scientific concept, student might ask, "Why do objects sink or float?" and then explore answers through investigation. Research and investigation. Students engage in research and hands-on exploration to find answers to their questions. This could involve experiments, interviews, field works, or analyzing data. It encourages uh, it encourages the development of critical thinking and problem-solving skills. As students evaluate evidence, reflect on their findings, and form conclusions. Teacher as a guide. The teacher's role to facilitate learning by providing resources, scaffolding the process, and supporting students as they explore and make sense of the information. The teacher may introduce relevant content, suggest tools or methods for investigation, and offer feedback on student progress. Benefit of IBL. Benefit of inquiry based learning: encourages critical thinking. Inquiry based learning fosters deep thinking and reflection as students are required to analyze information, draw conclusions, and solve problems. Promote engagement and curiosity. Students are more motivated to learn when they have the autonomy to explore topics that interest them. This sense of ownership over their learning processes increase engagement, develops research and investigation skills. Students gain experience in the research process, learning how to collect, evaluate, and present data. These skills are valuable for academic pursuits and real-world problem solving. Support differenti- support differentiation. Differentiation. Since students explore topics based on their interest and learning styles, inquiry based learning naturally supports differentiation in the classroom. Challenges of IBL. Challenges of inquiry based learning: requires time. Inquiry based learning can be time consuming as students must investigate and research their questions. This may pose a challenge in an environment with rigid curriculum constraints. Demand for teachers. The teacher must carefully plan and scaffold the learning process while ensuring that students remain focused and make meaningful progress. Managing managing the open-ended nature of inquiry can be challenging. May be difficult for some learners. Not all students may be comfortable with the level of independence required in IBL. Some may struggle to formulate questions or conduct research without clear guidance. Experiential learning. Experiential learning is a process of learning through direct experience, reflection, and application. This approach is based on the idea that learning is best achieved when students actively participate in experiences that allow them to apply concepts in real life context, followed by reflecting on those experiences to deepen understanding. Key features of experiential learning. Learning through action. Students learn by doing, participating in real-world experiences that are often hands-on and practical in nature. These experiences could include internship, fieldwork, lab experiment, community services, or role-playing activities. Promote engagement and curiosity. Students are more motivated to learn when they have the autonomy to explore topics that interest them. The sense of ownership over their learning processes increases engagement, develops research and investigation. Students gain experiences in the research processes, learning how to collect, evaluate, and present data. These skills are valuable for academic pursuits and real world problem solving. Supports differentiation. Since students explore topics based on their interest and learning styles, inquiry based learning naturally supports differentiation in the classroom. Comparison, inquiry based learning, and experiential learning. Focus. IBL, inquiry based learning, emphasizes the process of questioning and investigation, where learning is driven by the curiosity and inquiry of student. Experiential learning emphasizes learning through direct experiences and reflection on that experience. Role of the teacher. In inquiry based learning, the teacher acts as a facilitator who guides students through the inquiry processes. In experiential learning, the teacher also acts as a guide but may be more involved in designing and facilitating real world experiences for students. And goals. Inquiry based learning focuses on developing critical thinking, research, and problem solving skills. Experiential learning focuses on practical application, reflection, and real world problem solving. Learning environment. Inquiry based learning can take place in a variety of environment, but is often classroom based with research or hands-on investigation. Experiential learning often take place in authentic real-world environment like internship, labs, or community projects. Behaviorist approach. The behaviorist approach to learning rooted in the work of psychologists like John B. Watson and B. F. Skinner focuses on observable behavior rather than internal mental states. It emphasizes that learning occurs through interaction with the environment and the behavior are shaped by reinforcement or punishment. This approach holds that learning can be measured by change in behavior and it discourages internal thoughts or emotions as central to understanding how learning occurs. Application of behaviorism in education. Direct instruction. Behaviorism supports structured, teacher led instruction where learning is broken down into small, incremental steps. Teachers present information, give clear instruction, and use reinforcement to shape learning. For example, when teaching math, the teacher might present a problem, demonstrate how to solve it, and then reinforce student with praise or rewards when they solve similar problems correctly. Direct drill and practice. Repetitive practice is a common behaviorist strategy. For example, flashcards for memorizing vocabulary or multiplication table rely rely on repeated exposure and reinforcement until the correct response becomes automatic. Positive reinforcement in the class. Teachers use positive reinforcement to encourage desired behaviors. For instance, praise, gold stars, or extra recess time might be used as a reward for students who participate or completed their work on time. Behavioral objectives. Lessons based on the behaviorist approach often include clear, measurable objectives that specify what student will be able to do after instruction. These objectives focus on observable behaviors. For example, student will be able to solve 10 additional problems in 5 minutes. Behavioral intervention programs. Schools used behavior modification programs to help students manage inappropriate behavior. For example, teacher might use a reward system to encourage good behavior and set up consequences for negative behavior, time out or loss of privilege. Learning outcomes focused on observable behavior. In behaviorist classroom, learning outcomes are often focused on what student can do after instruction rather than on what they understand or internalize. Success is measured through tests or assessment that evaluate observable performance. Humanistic approach. The humanistic approach to education emphasizes to develop the whole person, focusing on emotional well being, self actualization, and personal growth, rooted in the work of Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. It views learning as deeply personal and self directed process. Key ideas include student centered learning. The student's feelings, experiences, and self perception are central. Learning should be meaningful and connected to the student's personal goals and interests. Self actualization. The goal of education is to help students reach their fullest potential, encouraging creativity, autonomy, and critical thinking. Intrinsic motivation. Learning is driven by internal motivation, not external rewards. The focus is on fostering a love of learning rather than achieving grades or rewards. Positive learning environment. The teacher acts as a facilitator, creating a supportive, non judgmental environment that encourages risk taking, self expression, and emotional growth. Holistic development. Education is not just about academic but also about emotional, social, and psychological development. In essence, the humanistic approach prioritizes the learner's personal growth, self awareness, and emotional well being over rote memorization or standardized performance. Conflict theory on education. Conflict theory is a sociological perspective that views society as being in constant conflict due to competition for limited resources. This theory, rooted in the work of Karl Marx, is often applied to various societal institutions, including education. From a conflict theory perspective, education is not a neutral mechanism of socialization, but rather a tool used by those in power to maintain and perpetuate, uh, perpetuate inequalities within society. Here are the detailed exploration of conflict theory in education. Education is as a means of maintaining social inequality. Conflict theory theorists argue that education serves to reinforce social stratification and ensures that the position of power and privileges remain in hands of the elite. Schools. Schools, they claim, perpetuate existing class structures by systematically benefiting those from more affluent background while disadvantaging lower socioeconomic groups. For example, funding disparities. Schools in wealthier areas tend to have more resources, better facilities, and more qualified teachers than those in poorer regions. This, this discrepancy leads to unequal educational outcomes, reinforcing class inequalities. Access to higher education. Students from wealthier families are more likely to attend better schools, receiving additional tutoring, and participating in extracurricular activities that improve their chances of attending prestigious universities. In contrast, students from lower income families may face more barriers to higher education, limiting their upward social mobility. Number two, cultural capital and hidden curriculum. Conflict theory also focuses on the concept of cultural capital, a term coined by sociologist Pierre uh, Bourdieu. Cultural capital refers to the non-financial social assets and promotes social mobility such as education, intellect, style of speech, and dress. Reproduction of dominant culture. Schools tend to value and promote the culture, norms, behaviors, and knowledge of the dominant class. This process ensures that students from privileged background who already possesses this cultural capital are better able to succeed in the educational system. In contrast, students from less privileged background may struggle because their cultural values and experiences are devalued. Hidden curriculum. Theorists argue that schools are also teach a hidden curriculum, a set of values and behaviors that align with societal expectations of authority, hierarchy, and conformity. This hidden curriculum helps to reduce the labor force needed in a capitalist society. Working class students, for example, may be subtly prepared for blue collar jobs that requires obedience and routine work, while students from privileged background are prepared for leadership and managerial roles. Credentialism. Conflict theory also highlight credentialism, the idea that educational qualification, degree, certification are increasingly required for job even when these qualifications may not directly related to the skills needed for the job. This system benefits those who can afford to pursue higher education, creating a barrier for others. Credentialism allows the dominant class to monopolize certain jobs, ensuring that higher paying and prestigious occupations remain accessible to those who can afford to spend more time and money on education. Tracking and labeling. Another key concept within conflict theories view on education is tracking, or the practice of grouping students according to their perceived ability or academic achievement, reinforcing class divisions. Conflict theorists argue that tracking tends to reinforce existing class inequalities because students from affluent background are more likely to be placed in higher tracks, advanced or honors program, while students from lower socioeconomic background are more often placed in lower tracks. Once placed in a lower track, it can be difficult for students to move upward, which limit their future opportunities. Labeling theory. This suggests that label applied to students such as gifted or remedial can significantly influence their educational experiences. When students are labeled in way that reflect stereotypes about their social class or racial background, it can lead to self-fulfilling prophecy where they internalize those labels and perform according to expectations, whether high or low. Education as ideological control. Conflict theorists also argue that education serves as a means of ideological control through the curriculum, and the hidden curriculum schools instill values and beliefs that align with the interest of ruling class, promoting a sense of acceptance of social inequality. Legitimization of inequality. For example, the meritocratic ideal, the belief that hard work and talent determines success is often emphasized in school. However, conflict theorists argue that this uh, ignores the systematic barriers that prevent disadvantaged groups from achieving success while legitimize the success of the wealthy as a result of individual effort rather than privilege. Racial and gender inequality. Conflict theorists also apply their perspective to issue of race and gender in education. They argue that the education system reproduces racial and gender inequalities by promoting Eurocentric curricula that marginalize the histories and contributions of minority groups, enforcing gender roles through socialization in classrooms, perpetuality racial biases through discriminatory disciplinary practices, and unequal treatment of students of color. Criticism of conflict theory in education. While conflict theory provides a useful lens to examine power dynamics in education, it has been criticized for its overly negative and deterministic view. Critics argue that one theory underestimates the role of individual agency and the way in which education can provide opportunities for social mobility. Moreover, this suggests that conflict theorists may overlook the complexities and nuances of how schools operate and how education can foster positive social change. Conclusion. In summary, conflict theory views education as a tool that perpetuates social inequalities by favoring those who from privileged background and maintaining the status quo of stratified society. While it's highlight critical issues within the educational systems, such as funding disparities, cultural biases, and tracking, it also opens the door for discussion on how education can be reformed to create a more just and equitable society. Open system theory. Open system theory was initially developed by Ludwig van Barton Lanfy in 1959, a biologist whose theory defines the concept of a system where all systems are characterized by a combination of parts and the relation that make them interdependent. Open system theory views organizations as dynamic systems interacting with their environment. In education, open system theory recognizes schools as open systems that exchange resources, information, and energy with their external environment. Key principles of open system theory (OST) in education. Interdependence. Education institutions rely on external resources, funding, community support, and stakeholders, parent policymakers. Adaptability. Schools adapt to environmental changes, demographic shifts, technological advancement, and demands. Accountability measures. Feedback loops. Information flows between system, component, teachers, student, administrators to improve decision making. Homeostasis. Homeostasis. Balance between internal stability, routine practices, and external changes, innovations. Component of open system in education. Inputs. Resources, funding, personnel, students, information, curriculum research. Number two, through throughput, teaching, learning processes, administration, assessment. Number three, output, graduates, knowledge, skills. Number four, feedback, evaluation, assessment, research. Open system theory advantages, theoretical benefits, holistic understanding. Consider education as an interconnected system, dynamic perspective, recognizes constant changes and adaptation. Interdependence emphasizes relationship between components. Feedback loop encourage continuous improvement. Practical applications. Adaptive curriculum design responsive to change societal needs, collaborative teaching, foster teacher professionalism and teamwork, student centered learning, focus on individual needs and interests, community engagement, encourage partnership and resource sharing, educational outcomes, improved student outcomes, personalized learning and effective assessment, teacher development, continuous learning and growth, increased efficiency, resource optimization and reduced waste, enhanced innovation, encourages creativity and experimentation, organizational benefits, flexible decision making, responsive to change circumstances, decentralized leadership, empowers teachers and staff, cross functional teams, foster collaboration and communication, continuous improvement, encourages innovation and progress. Real world examples: project based learning PBL, competency based learning CBE, personalized learning plans PLAPs, community based learning CBL. Disadvantages of open system. Here are the disadvantages of open system theory. Theoretical limitations. Overemphasis on adaptability, neglect stability and continuity. Lack of clear boundaries, difficulty defining system components. Insufficient attention to power dynamics, ignores inequality and social justice. Over reliance on feedback loops, assumes effective communication. Practical challenges, complexity and unpredictability. Difficult to manage and anticipate change. Resistance to change, inertia and uh, inter- entrenched interest. Resource constraint, limited funding, personnel and infrastructure. Difficulties scaling innovation. Challenges replicating successful programs. Educational concerns. Potential for fragmentation, lack of coherence and coordination, overemphasis on external accountability, neglect internal motivation, insufficient attention to teacher agency, undervalues teacher professionalism, difficult, difficulty measuring success, challenges evaluating complex dynamic systems, alternative perspective. Critical theory emphasize power dynamics, social justice. Chaos theory recognize complexity, unpredictability. Social network theory highlight relationship networks. Complexity theory focus on self-organization, emergence. Conclusion: open system theories has advantages over other theories because it takes your environment into account, and open system approach get a more realistic picture of the pressure on you, your organization and your student.